Dominic Steele, and Jesus and the incoming tidal wave of people from South Asia. The largest group of migrants coming to Australia at the moment is from India. Just 5 years ago, Hindu migrants, well, they used to be the third largest group, but in the last few years, the group of Hindus migrating from India have overtaken, well, China and England to become the largest constituency of migrants. So evangelizing Hindus is a massive priority. Ben George chairs the Sydney Anglican South Asian Ministry Committee, known as Satya, or Truth. Assumptas Venkatachalam is from a Hindu background, and she's a member here at Village Church at Annandale in Sydney. And Clive, well, he's just started as an evangelist, reaching Hindus and South Asians with the Sydney Anglican Ministry, Evangelism and New Churches. Assumptas, let us start with you and the pastor's heart and your concern for people of Hindu background. This is not abstract at all for you.
No, I've been a Christian now for 20 years, and I think I can count the people who have come to Christianity from a Hindu background on one hand. Mm-hmm. And
you've been watching carefully.
Yeah. I've been watching carefully. I want to find more people who are like me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, unlike other communities where there's been like a real evangelism effort, there hasn't really been an evangelism effort towards Hindus. Mm-hmm. They're my people, and I can't help but have a heart for them.
You feel kind of caught between two cultures?
I do. I've said before that when I am around non-Indians and non-Hindus, I feel very Australian, and when I'm around Aussies, I feel very, very Indian and very Hindu. Mm. So,
tell us about, one of the lines Ben's told me is, we shouldn't generalise about Hindus because it's so different, the different fractured communities. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily call them fractured. I would call them distinct. The nation of India came about historically because of the British. Really, it was a number of states, a number of tiny countries. So Ben and I, both Indian, come from different states, speak different languages, and if we weren't Christian, if we didn't have Jesus to unite us, I would be like, oh yeah, he's from Kerala. Right. He's not from Tamil Nadu, he's from Kerala.
And you feel like that about her? Sort of?
No, well, not now, but otherwise, technically, that's right. Yeah, there's just something different. They're not us. They're different. She's Tamilian. It's not the same. Right. Yeah. And there's just something then different about that in terms of how different families will mingle together, and that flows out into community events and other things. The Tamils will gather, the Malayalis will gather, the Gujaratis will gather, but they won't really gather together except for cricket.
Right.
So the Indian cricket team, that's India.
That's the one thing we're sure
about.
That's
right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And everyone's devastated when India loses. But outside of that, everything else is very much each people group by themselves.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. And so how do you feel about Assumpta? Yeah.
She's a sister in Christ.
Thank you.
But I'm from Sri Lanka, so I guess we were always kind of a younger brother or younger cousin. But yeah, it was interesting. My really good friends, one is from a Tamil Sri Lankan background, the other's from Kerala background. And when they were getting married, even though they're from they're believers, both their families are believers, they were like, oh, we're not sure about this union because these guys are from Kerala and these guys are from Tamil, from Sri Lanka, Tamil. So it's really interesting how that kind of culture still plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got to say to those people watching at home, I was a little bit shocked when these guys arrived because the first topic of conversation was the Netflix show Indian Matchmaking. And I've never watched The Bachelor, let alone Indian Matchmaking. But what does it say, and why do you like it?
Well, I've never watched The Bachelor either.
Yeah.
But I think of it as just like a documentary almost. Indian Matchmaking. It's a bunch of what we like to call 1.5 generation Hindus, Sikhs. There are no Christians on there, so Hindus and Sikhs, and Jains, who are kind of a subset of Hindus, in America, trying to find true love. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting to see that idea of they come from, their parents moved here from India, they grew up in America, they've got this fundamentally Indian worldview, which is family is so important. My parents need to like them. They need to get along with my family. It's that sort of conservative family sort of worldview, but also this individualistic, I want to find true love. This person will complete me. This person will meet my needs. And I think it's such a good kind of analogy of what we're dealing with Hindus, where you've got Hindus coming here with their subconscious sort of Hindu ideals, not really practicing, and then also absorbing sort of Western individualistic ideals as well. And so you're not going to deal with just people who are Hindu, but they're not like Aussies either. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really interesting kind of observing of human behaviour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ben, Hindu matchmaker.
I think I've seen less episodes than both these guys, but it is just very helpful for us to just get our mindset just shifting a little bit to think about families, and especially wider families. So don't just think, husband, wife, 3 children. Think husband, wife, 3 children, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth cousins, and all of those people have a part to play in all big, significant events in life. And so just seeing how much every single part of the dating ritual that goes on, people are thinking about, what am I interested in? What's really important to me? What's going to benefit the family? What's going to benefit all the other people? And what are they going to say? And how's that going to affect the family? And so a lot of the times when people say things and gossip happens in the Malayali community, that doesn't get reflected on me, that gets reflected on my parents. Mm-hmm. And so I need to know that beforehand, because my parents will get irritated with me because of something that I said that was unwise, because I should have known that was going to happen. And all of these things sort of play out in a very over-the-top sort of way in Indian Matchmaker, but it just gives us a bit of an insight into what we're dealing with. Because when these guys come into our churches, if that's
the case about matchmaking,
yes,
how much more about coming into relationship with Jesus?
Exactly right. Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Cool. Stay on Matchmaker with you, Clive.
Yeah. I've also never really watched Bachelor, but
no, it's an honesty moment. You confess up, Clive. It's fine.
I'm honest. My wife watches it, but I'm not really interested. But when I watch Indian Matchmaking, it's really interesting that Hindus who've grown up in America, they may not go to the temple, they may not be really devout Hindus, but when they have issues trying to find a match, then the matchmaker will go to an astrologer or a guru. And then even the 1.5 generation Hindu will think, I need to say this mantra. This is why this is not working for me. And
so you kind of revert to type almost.
Yeah,
pretty much.
That's right.
And then they go to the astrologer and they'll go, I'll say this mantra and I'll connect with God again, and God's in control. And so even though they don't really practice, they go back to I need to kind of seek God's wisdom or the fate or whatever it is. Yeah, it's very interesting.
How is attempting to win a Hindu person to Jesus Christ different to, we've got a lot of Anglos watching now who work with Hindu people. What do I do that would be different to what I do in thinking of winning an Anglo person to Jesus Christ? Yeah.
I think the piece about family and how we minister to people in families and communities, not just individuals. So, an individual might be interested in the gospel, they might understand it intellectually, and yet their family pull is so strong. We need to actually minister to them, visit them in their homes, have meals with them, and share Jesus in a very relational way. Because even though they might understand it intellectually, culturally they feel a very strong divide. And so that's going to be a big barrier for them.
Assumpta?
I think that... I think what we need to understand, I think it does come back to family, but I think that we underplay the cost of coming to Christ for a Hindu. What you're essentially doing is fracturing. You're making a deliberate break between you and thousands of years of culture and your family as well. So when a Hindu, when I came to church, I had a massive culture shock because it was so individualistic. And I do remember that those who leave family and fields will inherit brothers and sisters and fields in this life and the life to come. And I remember coming to church and going, where is this family? Because everyone's family was their nuclear family, and I felt deeply, deeply alone. I felt so lonely when I came to church. And so I think that if you are going to minister, if you're going to take ministry to Hindus seriously, you need to show them that there is a viable family within the church, that there will be people who will take care of them, that there will be people. So I'm single, so not only did I leave my Hindu family, but I come into a family without a husband or children, but there are people who come in with their families and have left their Hindu families, and so things like making meals or daycare or popping in or things like that you would have with your family naturally. Where is that in the church? So that's the challenge that I would give to people in churches that have Hindus in them or are in Hindu areas, that the intellectual gospel is not enough.
I mean, as you say that, I'm thinking of another overlay in that Assumptas is a member of our church here, and we're in the inner city. And there is a real sense in the inner city that we're, if you like, people in the country, they're branches on family trees. And you're saying even more, a Hindu person is a branch on a family tree. Whereas here in the inner city, you're a hydroponic plant plonked into the water with no attachment of branches because you've moved here for study or moved here for, but you haven't. Most people haven't grown up here, in this part of the world. Do you want to comment on that and your experience as a hydroponic plant in our church?
Oh, no. I wasn't expecting this question. So my experience, I think when I first came here, I was like a dandelion floating in the wind. I really was. I would say that I spent the first 10 years. So I didn't become a Christian because it was lovey-dovey and it made me feel good and fuzzy and things like that. I became a Christian because it was the truth.
You're a fact person.
I'm a fact person, and well, actually, no. I realise that my Hindu background has made me less of a fact person than I thought.
Okay.
But I became a Christian because
you've always told me you were a fact person.
I know, but I think my Hindu-ness has made me less factual than I thought. But I became a Christian because I had a very real experience with Jesus, and I could not deny it. But I didn't want to become a Christian, and I remember saying to God, is there any way I can become a Christian? Is there any way I can follow Jesus without becoming a Christian? I actually asked him that question, and you can tell what his answer was. No, you have to become a Christian. So I spent the first 10 years being very, very culture shocked by Australian Christianity, and that's where I was when I came to Village. I did not want to come to church, and I had very negative views of church. Now I've been here for 10 years, so obviously Village is doing something right. But when I came, Village gave me that family, that stability, and people who actually accepted me for who I am. In my other churches, I always felt very weird and very outside, whereas Village, I guess being hydroponic, you just got to take people where they're at. Whereas in other areas, if you're part of a family tree, then you can only be a certain way without, So I think that was what was great about Village, is that I felt part of a family. But then I felt also very, very lonely because Village, being in a predominantly sort of Caucasian kind of westernized area, kind of reflects that. And it's the emphasis on individual nuclear families and that kind of thing. We can't help but be impacted by that kind of culture. I
think that plays into the difference between what Westerners call family and what Hindus call family. So
it's so much richer and deeper, you're saying.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be flippant by saying, oh, don't worry, leave your family and we'll be a family for you. And the Hindu person thinks, oh, really? Will you come to my house and look after my kids before I get home from work? And Westerners like, oh, no, that's not what I meant by family. They expect a much more integrated and interdependent kind of family.
That's right.
We need to actually invest and love people, and it's costly, I guess. For Western...
and messy.
And messy, yeah.
Yes.
Western culture is very efficient, time-based. You have this amount of time. Whereas love is not efficient. Love is costly and sacrificial. And are we prepared to give that sacrifice of time and love and investment?
And most pastors are watching are going to be thinking, well, I hear you say that. I'll just speak for me for a minute. I think my relational bank is full. I haven't got any more room for relationships.
Yeah.
And so I haven't got any more room to go the extra mile. What do you say to me, Ben? You know, because you're about to start a share house to get more people into your life.
That's right. I guess, so it sort of links to your original question to Clive and Assumpta. I guess the thing I want to say is that there's no special silver bullet in a sense. It's almost like we want to do exactly the same things that Reformed evangelical Christians have been doing. We just want to trust the theology and be able to get out of our comfort zone in doing it more. And so what I want to say to pastors really is, you may have a full relational bank and you may be caring for the people in the church, but really what we want to be seeing is that each individual in the church who has some relational capacity is then going out of their way to do these things. We want to see genuine discipleship. Because the other thing that's very obvious for most of the South Asians that I've met is they can tell when things are genuine and not genuine. And so you'll preach this cracker sermon and it'll teach about family and discipleship and the church family and how we're all one under Christ. And then they will look around the church and they'll be able to pick the 3 people that are not quite living that out. And so being able to challenge our people to be genuine, authentic disciples and have messy lives and messy church together is actually profoundly helpful. Because it also gets rid of a bunch of stereotypes that a lot of people from India that are coming, first generation Indians, are going to have about Christians. Because it's not that we are arrogant and we are these people who have such a new religion when we've had a 4,000 or 5,000 year old religion and who are you to teach us, you young whippersnappers. It's actually, no, we are humble and we are messy and we exercise forgiveness regularly, and reconciliation is really important to us. And those things cover over a lot. And so that's really what I want to say, is that every individual church needs to work out how every person in that church contributes to this culture of discipleship, which is actually what ministers have been saying all along.
That's spot on, Ben, because I remember when I first came to church, I could tell who were the fakes straight away. And that's one of the things that I have told people who have asked me, okay, how can we, because I get asked this a lot, how can we, what are your top 3 tips for getting Hindus into church? And one of them is your faith cannot be delineated between Sundays and the rest of the week, or Sundays and 10 minutes of Bible study, Bible reading every night. It has to be holistic. It has to be holistic. And it has to be honest as well. So being gently honest. And I usually say things like gently unashamed, because Hindus are often very unashamed of their religion. You'll see, I work in Parramatta, full of Indians. I work in IT, full of Indians. And people often come to work with the vermilion, the red, and the ash.
Yeah.
Because that morning they've done their prayers and they put the vermilion and the ash and they come to work with it. And they're very, very open about their religion. And I think we Christians are actually kind of, oh, should I talk about my faith or not?
Or should I wear a cross as
should
a piece
I wear
of jewelry?
A cross? Anything to sort of, because we don't want to upset people or things like that. We want to be a Jew to the Jew and a Greek to the Greeks, but we kind of take that too far. And so can we not be gently unashamed of our religion, of our faith? Because I find that Hindus, when you're gently unashamed of your faith, they're actually quite curious. Because a lot of Hindus our age tend to not be very religious, not very active, but they have this gap or this emptiness in them that causes them to seek kind of astrology or mantras when things are not going well. So when they see somebody who is actually very open but not pushy and very holistic about their faith, like it impacts every single aspect of their life, they're kind of curious. And so I think that's what we need to be, rather than thinking, how do I do 2 ways to live but Hindu style? And
that goes into another point, I guess. So community is one thing, but also experience is very powerful for Hindus. 70% of people who've come to Christ from India and Nepal have come because of some kind of experience. a spiritual experience, an answered prayer, or just another believer who really lives out their faith and is devoted. Mm-hmm. A lot of Hindus are very devoted, whereas they see, Christians as, quite individualistic and private and not true followers of Jesus. So if we can be an experience of a real follower of Jesus, a devoted follower of Jesus who walks with Jesus, that can really turn their perception of what followers of Jesus are like.
To see more Hindus come to Christ, there's going to be things in our churches that alienate them. What might we need to change structurally in terms of what happens at church to actually, how do we be a Jew to be like the Jews, not just in our personal outreach, but in terms of our public meetings, things like that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. This is sort of not going to answer your question a bit because it changes depending on the subculture. Also changes depending on the place you're in. But there was a lovely Nepalese Christian woman who came to church last week. And then it was the first time at our church. And afterwards I asked her how she found church and how she found the people and were they welcoming. And she said, church was really welcoming, but it was too short. An hour, 20 minutes. What's that? Like that's. She said it was almost like she just wanted to sit down and then. That's right. But this is a generalization. But at staff meetings, we sort of think, all right, well, how are we going to keep it to an hour and a half or less? Because we need people. They have busy lives. Yeah. But she wants to chat for another 4 hours over morning tea. With my when I was growing up with the Matoma Church, an Indian cultural church. We would spend the whole day there. Yeah. All the kids would attend church. Church would be 3 hours long. And then after that, you would have Sunday school. And then after that, you would go out for lunch together. And then after that would be choir practice. And literally all the kids would be sleeping in a pile on the side while the parents did whatever they needed to do. And that was normal. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things we need to work out how to do. It doesn't mean that now everybody suddenly has to just have more time. That's not really a realistic thing to think. But there are things we can do. You can invite other families to your family gatherings. This happens a lot at Easter and Christmas and things like that as well. Yeah. Christmas is even tighter because we need to go because we've got family things to attend.
Yeah. Assumpta? Yeah.
I know you're asking how we can get. Are you asking how we can get Hindus into church?
Well, I'm thinking
how we can change church structures.
One of the things I've noticed is. And I was discussing this with Mike Rader actually the other day, that if I want people, a particular group of people, I mean, when I first came here, the average age was 60. I wanted young families to come, so I put in young family illustrations, and so and I started to speak as if there were young families there, and eventually there were, whereas if I just speak about your anxiety about superannuation and stuff like that, then I'm going to be self-perpetuating the 60-year-olds. What do I want to change so that you will think, you know what, they understand my culture here. I think it would be safe to invite somebody to Village Church. Yeah.
I think that most Hindus won't walk into a church. I think let's just be realistic. A lot of Hindus won't walk into a church. So if you say, come to the Sunday meeting, I personally don't think a lot of Hindus will just go, sure.
Okay.
But I might be wrong. No? I think that...
Well, I haven't for a while, yeah.
So I think that my family...
Well, you've had the odd family member come.
I've had the odd family member come, and the reason why they've come is because of things like gingerbread house making, wreath making at Christmas. So things that are not... that bring them into the church are not confronting, but make them comfortable that coming into this building is not going to be... because coming into a church is actually quite confronting, and they're not sure what to expect. They don't know if somebody's going to ask them to do something they disagree with or something like that. So I think that as a church, what we can do is we can have events and things like that, or have opportunities for Hindus to come into the church and not be sort of blasted with Christian stuff, obvious Christian stuff. I know at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, there have been little short talks that are very, very easy to understand, aren't too confronting, that kind of thing. So I think that's number one. Number two is a lot of Hindus are vegetarian. So I think and will not go near meat.
Yeah.
Like they generally don't like meat next to veg, things like that. So it's just sort of trying to understand, okay, right, if we're going to have people who eat meat and people who eat veg, we just got to make sure that we respect that that certain Hindus will not even eat veg that's next to like a plate of meat or something like that. So just little things like that we just wouldn't think of. I think though that a lot of Hindus, as Clive said, come to Christ through experience and knowing a Christian who lives out their faith. I didn't become a Christian by coming to church. The first time I properly went to church was after I became a Christian. I think what we need to be doing is training our people to go out, to go out and meet their neighbours and be Christians, holistic, gently unashamed, holistic Christians to their neighbours, because that's what brings people to church. My family came to church for Christmas Eve because I kept asking them to come to these gingerbread things. I kept living out my faith. I was very gentle. I was, a better daughter than I had been before, a better cousin, a better sister. And people could see that. And so they're now more kind of primed to be like, okay, she's like that. Maybe the people she knows are. And I introduced them to my Christian friends as well. So a couple of people from village came to my mum's house and did all this like maintenance work for her. She's this, a single older woman, and they came and they, washed the windows and cleaned and all that sort of stuff. And now she knows these people by name and face. So when I bring her to church, there's Fiona, there's Jess.
I think that is really key, because when a Hindu is considering Christ, they have religion and culture so intertwined. And so they look at Christians and they think, everything that Westerners do is Christian. And so if my son or daughter is going to this church, it's almost like they're becoming Western. And so at that point where they're considering Christ, it's really important for Christians to visit their home and be a loving presence. So the parents are not thinking, these people are trying to take my son away. Actually, these people are loving me and they're respecting my culture and they're sharing Jesus in a natural way. It's not just...
And cleaning my window.
Cleaning my windows.
Yeah.
And you know what? My mum made them a massive Indian meal.
Right.
She made a huge meal and shared it with everybody.
Yeah.
And she loved it. Absolutely loved cooking for them.
Yeah. So it's not like my son is leaving my culture to become a Westerner or a Christian Westerner. But actually, they're coming to my house and respecting my culture and loving us as a family. That's really important, because often Hindus, when they become followers of Jesus, their family ends up, there's a massive rift between them and their family. So we don't want that to happen. We want them to continue to witness to Jesus in their families. And so you don't have to stop being an Indian or a Sri Lankan to become a follower of Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the process is long. I think we need to be patient. And I think of a friend of mine who had been trying to convert me since year 4. She's this, lives in the Hills district, comes from a Christian background, Christian family, been trying to convert me since year 4, so 10 years old, year 5, yeah. And I became a Christian when I was 23. She just persisted, even though I was like, no. So I think even Hindus, I think the problem with Hindus is that we seem like impenetrable. We're not like others. We're kind of slippery. You say, a Christian might say something and they go, yeah, cool, I believe that too. I believe Jesus is a God. Cool. And you say, oh, no, but he's the only God. Oh, okay, well, I believe in one God too. So it's kind of like, how do you navigate this kind of stuff?
Well, how do you? So you're the one who's training people in this. How do you?
You're the Hindu expert, Clive.
No, not at all. No, I think the Genesis narratives are really important, because there you see one God creating everything and creating us in his image. So it's not like we are already God, because Hindus think that God is inside us rather than that we are separate beings created by God. And then you see the fall, how we have rejected God, and there's actually a rift between us and God. So Hindus think there's no rift, it's just ignorance. God is in us. And so when they see, actually God is distinct from me and I've actually turned my back on God, then they can see the reason why Jesus is different. He's the only one who really deals with our our path, our rebellion, our sin, and offers a solution rather than just, vague kind of knowledge to get us out of that ignorance. Jesus is the only one who really deals with our, well, I guess you could put it in Hindu terms, karma, our negative karma. He actually takes on all of that. And so unless they see the problem, they're not going to see Jesus as the solution.
But it might take a long time.
It takes a long time.
Takes a very long time for some.
We could go on, but we probably need to stop. My guests on the Pastor's Heart, Ben George. He chairs the Sydney Anglican South Asian Ministry Committee, known as Satya. Assumpta Venkatachalam, he's from a Hindu background and she's a member here at Village Church in Sydney. And Clive has just started as an evangelist reaching Hindus and South Asians with Evangelism and New Churches here in Sydney. This has been The Pastor's Heart. My name's Dominic Steele and we'll be back with you next Tuesday afternoon.